Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending LabManager's Leadership Digital Summit. My name is Mary Beth DiDonna, and I'll be moderating this discussion. Lab managers already possess the skills needed to be great researchers, but many have expressed the need for more training to effectively manage and lead their lab. Managers are tasked with budgeting and financial decisions, creating a positive work culture, ensuring the lab has the right equipment and instruments, hiring and retaining staff, ensuring compliance to health and safety standards, and much more. Welcome to our session on implementing an informatics strategy to increase efficiency and drive profitability of your laboratory. Managing a modern-day laboratory presents many challenges. Management is responsible for providing complex analytical services to an ever-changing scientific and regulatory landscape while maintaining a high level of service and quality. Laboratories operate in a highly competitive environment, resulting in external pricing pressure while running a high fixed cost business. Progressive laboratories are implementing informatics strategies to increase efficiencies and reduce costs. This webinar will examine the challenges of the modern-day laboratory and demonstrate how informatics position them for future service and business success. We like our webinars to be very interactive, so we encourage you to send us your questions at any point during today's webinar. Our speaker will address these questions during the question and answer session following his presentation. To ask a question, simply type your query into the question box, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll try to address as many questions as possible during our time together. If we run out of time, I will forward any unanswered questions to today's speaker, and he can respond to you directly if possible. Additional resources for today's presentation are located on the right-hand side of your screen. Excuse me. I would like to remind you that this webinar recording will be available on demand shortly following this live presentation. I'd also like to extend a special thank you to our sponsors, whose support allows LabManager to keep these webinars free of charge for our readers. So with that, I'd like to introduce our presenter for this webinar. Robert Walla, principal at Astrix Technology Group, is responsible for the growth and strategic direction of the Professional Services Division. He has over 20 years of experience in laboratory informatics, including overseeing large global informatics projects. Robert has a BS in chemistry from Rutgers University. Rob, thanks for joining us today.
Mary Beth, thank you. Appreciate it, and thanks everybody for joining today. We're going to spend the next 30 or 40 minutes or so talking about informatics strategies. And as lab folks and as you've run your laboratories, I'm sure many of you have gone through implementing technology solutions, and we'll talk about that. But we're going to take it from a perspective of planning out the strategies and really help it drive your business, both from an increasing efficiency standpoint and from a profitability standpoint. Just maybe a little bit more about my background. Prior to joining Asterix, I ran a laboratory. So, I kind of sat where you guys are sitting, right now. I spent the first part of my career actually implementing informatics solutions. I'll date myself a bit. This was early 80s when there weren't a lot of commercial systems out there. So, the company that I worked for actually wrote its own LIMS system before a lot of the commercial ones were out there. And then I was involved with that. Actually implementing some of the earlier commercial systems as they started to come out in the early in mid 90s. So I've been on both sides of the fence. Now I help clients do that implementation. But I've been in your seat and recognize the challenges of running a laboratory, but then also trying to transform it at the same time. I have a couple of slides here on Astrix for those of you that don't know us. Simply put, we're a scientific services organization. We don't have products. We don't make products. We don't sell products. Everything that we do is around the services of the commercial systems that are out there. Been doing it for a while now. We just had our 25th anniversary back in August. And we have a lot of experience supporting laboratories. So in addition to myself, a couple of the other founders here of Astrix also worked in laboratories and ran them. So, we know it from both perspectives. We know it from the operation perspective of laboratories, the financial perspective of laboratories, as well as from the informatics standpoint as well. And when I talk about scientific informatics, just a general definition, you can think of it as really any system, any computer type system out there that collects, stores, processes, reports scientific data. Okay, and that could be in an R&D environment, it could be in a quality manufacturing QC environment, or even in the manufacturing area. So the systems that cover that, and there's many of them, we'll talk a little bit about that. That's what we mean by scientific informatics. As mentioned, we don't develop any of these systems. We're platform and vendor independent. We work with the majority of them out there, and we currently have about 820 employees. Just a quick overview of some of our services. We're going to spend today talking about that first area up there on the left-hand side, strategic planning. Where we help our clients not necessarily do the work, but just planning on performing certain aspects of their business. And today we're going to talk about the informatics roadmaps. But we also, under professional services there, we have a methodology about helping find the right systems for them. And today we're not going to talk about that really of the actual systems and how to find those, but more about how to planning and kind of abstract it, do an abstract view of it at this point. We have a full development and implementation team around the different technologies where we actually do the implementation of any integrations of the major systems out there. And then we do a lot of run support as well. So this is after we implement a system or our clients implement a system, we'll manage that informatics platform for them. And then I'll touch on this a bunch today, but we do a lot of work in the regulated environment. So we have a full quality group here where we do our computer system validation. Okay, so enough on Asterix. So today, like I said, what I want to talk about is how you can use and develop an informatics strategy to really help run your business. And what I'd like to start off with is really talking about laboratory characteristics. I'm sure this is going to be telling you guys a lot of what you already know, but just to set the stage. Laboratories obviously are very dynamic organizations. A lot of interdependent functional areas. Maybe you have a sample receipt group that needs to process samples, or in a sessioning group before it moves its way into sample preparation or into the analysis or assay phase. So a lot of groups that rely on each other. And each of these areas have very complex work processes. Regardless of what type of laboratory you are. If you're in a laboratory that does or supporting a drug development, that you're just seeing increasingly diverse drug products, and you need to respond to that. You probably know in an R&D organization, if you're supporting an R&D organization, that you need to be very flexible and responsive, to support the research and development of a company. So, not only is laboratory processes complex, in and of itself, but depending on the type of work that you do and who you support can certainly add to that. To add on to that, many of you I know are probably in highly regulated environments, either EPA, FDA, et cetera, which adds to that, right? Your strict documentation requirements. Data integrity obviously has been something that people have been focusing on now for several years. Probably over the last 3 or 4 years, just about every project that we've started had some sort of data integrity objective as part of that, where they're implementing or upgrading systems, our clients, in order to increase and satisfy data integrity requirements. So it's a big part of that. And to add insult to injury, I guess many, especially on the commercial laboratory side, it's a very competitive environment. There are pricing pressures. I used to run into this all the time when I was running a laboratory. Clients coming and saying, "Hey, we can get this for a few dollars less. What can you do for me?" Or my favorite was when they would ask for value-added services, which is basically asking for free stuff, right? Where we would be putting out reports, and they'd say, "Hey, can you do expanded reports? Can you give me electronic data deliverables? Can you do this for me? And oh, by the way, we don't expect to be charged for that because we pay for the analysis." So there's that. And then that puts a bow on this is the high fixed cost aspect of the business, and we'll touch on that in a bit. So this is an actual work process that we did for a client. Sorry for the eye chart, but it's by design, just to point out that in many areas of laboratories, this is really the day in and day out, right? You're Monday through Friday. And in this, there's a lot of inefficiencies, a lot of wait states, a lot of manual processes. So, this just goes to show that when we do what we call current state analysis, this is typically what we see. I'm going to dive into that in a little bit more detail. So what does this lead to? A lot of inefficiencies. In this day and age, there's still many paper-based processes out there. I know they've been talking about, the paperless lab forever. You've probably seen webinars or gone to conferences on it, or the lab of the future, about what that is going to look like. But if you go into just about every lab right now, there are paper-based processes. And, that is being reduced over time, certainly. A lot of laboratories have implemented automated solutions, but there's still a lot of paper out there. So what does that mean? A lot of manual data collection, especially for what we call the non-smart instruments like balances, maybe pH meters, things of that nature, RS-232 types of instruments where people are reading off of the instrument, writing it down in a logbook or on some sort of bench sheet, and then taking it from there. Instruments, I have here with a question mark because there's also manual data collection, as part of this. We often see our clients will have a instrument of some sort, runs the samples obviously automatically, but then that data then is taken either from a printout or something like that, and then manually typed into Excel to perform additional calculations or maybe some sort of linear regression or whatever it may be. Now, I'm sure some of you out there are smiling to yourselves because you do it that way, which is fine. Everybody does. So I guess, the saving grace is that you're not alone. We have we work in many environments with many different types of clients that even though they have chromatography data systems that could manually calculate everything, there's still manual processes there. And that is, we're working with clients. That's one of the things that we do to help them get off of that. So what does this mean? A lot of transcriptions, right? Taking data from writing it down in one place, transcribing it into another area, doing manual calculations, etc. And this just leads to a lot of checking of the checker, right? Peer reviews, management reviews, just to make sure all of that data is correct before it's reported out. And the reporting is even complex, especially in a commercial laboratory environment. If you do something like environmental analysis, for example, there's different packages that the EPA requires or clients require, and it can get quite involved with all the QC data that is required. So a lot of inefficiencies in laboratories today. If you take a look at the financials, this is actual financials from a laboratory that I was involved with at one point in time. You have very, very high fixed expenses here. And these are this is a snapshot of some of the expenses of this laboratory. And you can tell the majority of the expenses are in salaries and benefits. So basically human capital, the people that run your business. And that's a given. That's something that's obviously needed to run your business on a day-to-day basis, and it's very difficult to cut that without affecting the quality and the production throughput of your laboratory. So most laboratories out there will have their salaries and benefits somewhere between 50 and 70% of their expenses. And that's pretty common across the board, regardless of what type of laboratory that you run. So the goal is to how can you be more efficient in that area, to help drive your profits and help you get much more efficient. And over the years, companies have taken a couple of different approaches to this, and it's really by looking at laboratory informatics systems, and how can you reduce the manual processes, the inefficiencies by infusing technology into your business. And what you see on the left-hand side there is some of the common informatics systems that are out there: CDS, chromatography data systems, lab information management systems, etc. And these systems all handle some sort of the laboratory processes that you see on the on the right-hand side there. So these systems have been around for a long time. They have gone from a PC based, they've gone through the client server, and now many of them are in cloud types of technology. So they're getting better, they're keeping up with the technology. And really what it comes down to now is what's the proper way to implement these systems, taking a holistic approach with them. What has been happening over the years is that these strategies have generally been driven from the bottom up, in what we call kind of a transactional manner or a point solution, where without really a lot of consideration or planning, somebody that runs a lab says, hey, we're a lab, we're doing all this paper-based, we need a LIMS system, okay? Because we have to track samples, and LIMS systems are great at tracking samples, which is true. So they'll go out, they'll do some sort of an evaluation, maybe it's a formal evaluation, maybe not, and purchase a LIMS system and implement it over a period of time, and there it is. And then as they go through their journey, maybe they add an electronic lab notebook into it if it's applicable, or a scientific data management system. But what you're finding is that it's happening in silos for the most part. And there's a couple of things that result in this. You really don't get a very good end-to-end picture of what you're trying to accomplish. Where data is going to move, or how data is going to move. That is sort of a reactionary rather than being planned out. What is going to be the system of record? Often we'll do work for clients, and we'll see that there's a gray area where they have an electronic lab notebook, and that may have been the first system that was put in, but over time they've configured it or customized it, so now it's kind of doing LIMS type work a little bit, or vice versa, where they'll put a LIMS in, but then they'll retrofit it to do more on the research or development side. But then when you put one of those systems in, it's like, okay, well, who's going to handle what processes? What system is going to handle what data? And again, you're more in a reactionary mode than in a planning type mode. So we always counsel clients that it makes a lot of sense, and it'll make your informatics journey a lot easier, a lot more pleasurable if you just take the time to do a little planning. And that can come in a variety of different states. I'll talk about that. But when we talk about informatics strategies, really what we're talking about is developing an informatics roadmap. And this roadmap can really start at any time. You don't have to be a fully paper-based operation in order to plan it out. You could have a system or two or three and go through this roadmap. And at that point in time, it would just be looking at systems that you have, how are you using it, maybe changing that a little bit before we and you lay out the whole plan. So a little bit on informatics roadmaps. Basically, it's a document, and it's a framework that looks at your short-term and long-term goals and starts to match up specific technology in order to meet those goals. And I talk about a framework here because you're not going to wave the magic wand and all of a sudden overnight you're going to have everything in there, obviously, right? So this is we kind of call it the informatics journey. But this roadmap will lay out that framework for you so that you can prioritize critical areas to implement systems to handle what your objectives and requirements are, and then also plan for future strategic initiatives as well. So a roadmap is exactly that. It's laying out where you are right now and where you want to be over a period of a few years, maybe somewhere in the 3 to 5 year range. But there's a lot of ways you can use this framework. It kind of sets your path, obviously, but then it also facilitates communication to a variety of different stakeholders. Often, management will always ask you, okay, well, you want to buy these systems, what's it going to cost? What are you going to use it for? What's the benefit to the organization? How long is it going to take? Et cetera, et cetera. This roadmap starts to lay it out and answer those questions for management. This will also be an excellent way for you to communicate to the stakeholder groups, right? The users. Guys, here's our journey, and here's what we're going to be doing. A lot of times we talk to users of systems, and it's like, we don't know where we're going. We heard we were going to get a system, we didn't get it. We don't know what the plans are. So this document can be used in a variety of different ways. So how do you get there? A couple of different processes in order to develop this roadmap. First of all, obviously, is to define your business goal and drivers. What are you really trying to accomplish, within your specific environment? And as I mentioned before, you don't need to have all paper-based systems to do a roadmap. So you may want to define your current system inventory. Do you have LIMS systems? Do you have ELNs? Many clients that we work with have multiple of those. A lot of our pharma and biotech clients, they have 2 or 3 different LIMS systems and maybe 2 or 3 different ELNs, along with all those other systems that you previously saw. So let's inventory those systems. Let's get an assessment of what they're being used for. what are the systems of record for certain type of data? And then we're kind of talking what we call master data, right, or static data. This would be data like your maybe product, your product IDs, your methods, your equipment. Data that doesn't necessarily change, but is used as you do processing of samples or assays. What's the transactional data structures, meaning, how does data move between one system and the next? You've probably heard a lot of people talk about integration. Well, if you're going to have an efficient laboratory, you need to integrate, and that is true to a certain extent. But you want to go in there with a plan. Again, what data is going to own, what system's going to own the data, what other systems need the data, and how is it going to get from one to the other. As part of this will also be an assessment of laboratory processes, what your workflows are, the analysis needs, etc. So you really get a good understanding of that. And then once you start to understand this, you can start to identify and put together what that strategy looks like. And as I mentioned before, typically this is a 3 to 5 year type of a time frame. There are a lot of constraints with this. It takes time to implement these systems and plan them out. There are budget cycles that obviously you need to adhere to. I'm sure all of us would like to get one big check, have the money for everything, and just go about doing the implementations. But certainly that's not reality. That's why this is a journey that goes on for a few years. So just a little bit about business process mapping. This is typically the first step that you'll go through. And really what you're trying to do is understand that current state that I showed you. And how do you make that much more efficient? So really, it's a visual representation of your work process. That's a relationship between the steps required to produce whatever your end product is. Whatever type of laboratory that you operate, whatever your deliverable is, it's all about how do you get from the beginning to the end to that end product. This will capture all of your inputs, your outputs, your dependencies. And this is a two-step process. You do it initially for your current state, or as we call it, the as is. And then once that is outlined, then work to streamline that into a to-be state. The trick here obviously is obtaining details. This simple flow that you see there is generally what we see when we start to engage with a client. They say, hey, we've done some process mapping, let us provide it to you. It's very high level, maybe not this bad, but it's very, very high level. Basically, samples come in, we analyze them, we process them in some way, and we report them, and the end. But in order, obviously, to develop a roadmap and to really understand that, you have to get to that next level of granularity. And coming back to this diagram, this is typically what you see. And this will have primarily, when you're focusing from an informatics standpoint, it will be a lot about the processes, but also how samples and data flow through the laboratory specifically. And really, this is used to understand kind of how you're doing it, identify the inefficient areas, and when you lay it out like this, it becomes pretty obvious. Maybe the manual processes, and then you guys can work internally to develop something that's a lot more efficient. And what you're seeing here in this future state is the same area for that same client, where Asterix, we worked with them, we took the first pass at it, and then worked with the different users of the functional areas to become more efficient. And this was not only cutting out a lot of manual processes, but infusing some technology with integrations, etc. And you can see you can really cut down the processes and the number of steps drastically. And this is typically what we see. Takes a while to go through this, obviously. To make sure that every process and every step in the current state is identified, and then walking through this, because it's not just necessarily a single group that's involved in this. Sometimes there's multiple groups in areas where there's overlap, so it does take some time to go through this process. Once we have all of that complete, we perform what we call a business needs assessment. And it's basically kind of doing high level requirements of what you're looking to accomplish in each of the areas. So we would work with you to do a functional area review, and that's integrations and data flow, going down to a next level of granularity from that business process map. We would do the informatics platform analysis. So if you had systems in there, we would analyze all of those, understand how you're using it, work to make sure that each data system understood what their the source data was and their data of record was for each of those systems. And then start looking at things like your architecture, both from a technical standpoint, but then also from a data standpoint. Do you have a master data strategy? If not, let's start to take a look at that. What systems are going to own what data? What systems need it, and how do we get it from one to the other? And then once we go through that business needs assessment, then from there you can kind of lay out your informatics roadmap. Well, we call this developing high-level candidate architectures, because there's multiple ways to skin a cat and do this. So there's not just one correct way to do this. So you can put together multiple architectures that implement systems differently, or maybe there's different integration points on them, whatever that may be. And usually when you do a roadmap like this, you'll come up with a couple of them, a couple of three, maybe four different types of architectures that will be evaluated by the different by your different groups, by management, by your IT, by your quality group, before you tweak that and formulate formulate one. But this will, again, we'll look at all of the target systems. This will start to identify areas where you say, okay, this is the type of data that we collect in these areas, so we would need a system that has these characteristics. And that starts to lead you down the path. Okay, is it a scientific data management system, for example, if it's more of a document-oriented type of an area? Or is it more unstructured type data where an electronic lab notebook would be more applicable, as opposed to something that's more structured where maybe a LIMS would fit in? So this is where you start to look at all of these different areas, these different aspects. This roadmap will also provide guidance on the order and the priority of implementing these systems. There's probably the question I get asked more often when a client of ours is looking at system is like, well, what should come first? Should we do an ELN first because it's more in the R&D area and that's a little bit early in our process, as opposed to a system that's more toward our manufacturing? What's the right way to do it? And the answer is, well, there's really no right way to do it. It really depends on the organizations, and again, what your goals and objectives are. We've seen very successful ones where they put LIMS in first and then follow with the ELN or vice versa. So it's really highly dependent on a client and their operations. And I know sometimes clients probably think, you just don't want to tell me the answer because you're not getting paid for that right now. But that's not the case. It's truly it is highly dependent on the environment and the clients and their goals. But we always tell clients that we'll work with you if you don't have a clear understanding of that. We'll be able to provide some guidance on that. Part of this also is looking at the business aspect. Okay, obviously you're doing this to get a rate of return. You're not just doing it to doing it, but you want to get some return on investment out of that. We could certainly give direction and guidance on that, and coming up with a cost benefit analysis if need be, because again, all of these will have to be budgeted, and you'll certainly have to justify the expense. Here's a very simple candidate architecture that was put together to fit on the slide, but this will give you a sense of the kind of the level of detail here. We're not talking about any specific system. Okay, that'll be the next step, but this will just be to lay out the different areas of your organizations where certain systems would fit in, what they're going to integrate with. There's more detail to this as far as what data will be in one system as opposed to a next, what data will flow to another system, what data will house the master data, will be the master data system of record, etc. But it starts to lay this out. And I think you're getting a sense of this is it could be very involved, depending on the nature of your laboratory. And a lot of times we'll get engaged because clients will say, we just don't know where to start. It's almost overwhelming. A lot of times a client will start out actually trying to purchase a system because it's natural, right? Maybe you go to pre-COVID, you go to a trade show, you'd see a demo, or now we're seeing those online. It's very easy to start to look at these systems from a functionality standpoint. but diving too deep too early, gets you involved in the weeds, and you kind of lose sight of what you're trying to do. That's what we always say. Take some time to do a roadmap, and from there, things will become much clearer. And just take one step at a time. Yeah, and these roadmaps, they can be as simple or as complex as necessary to meet your objectives. We've done some of these where it gets very, very detailed and it takes a while to do it. And those are more high level. You kind of lay out the high level plan, clients comfortable with it, they sort of know where they're going, and we can take it from there. So just a little do's and don'ts before we open up for questions. So definitely look at different options, because you'll have a couple of different paths you can go down. It's always good to look at all your different alternatives. Definitely identify your risks as you're going through this. These projects will have risk. Every informatics project has one, so don't overlook those. And certainly understand, I'm sure you do, that there will be organizational disruption when you do this, when you start to implement systems. So that needs to be planned for. Okay, what are some of the issues that are going to happen when you start putting systems in? How are you going to handle it? What's the fallback position if things don't start to go well with your implementation? On the don't side, you don't want to necessarily be fully prescriptive when you do this. You're not going to have all of the answers to everything. Okay, but you have to get it to the right level of granularity. You can't be totally non-prescriptive either. We call it slideware, right? A bunch of PowerPoint presentations, but there's no real meat behind it. But one thing we always do, and we spend a lot of time, when we're involved in these types of projects, is don't ignore the potential risk. Have a risk management plan, identify them all, have a plan to address all of those. And I don't say if you're going to hit them, it's when you're going to hit them. All of these projects will have speed bumps. There's no doubt about it. So if you've been through these before, you understand. You certainly understand it. But we always say, don't ignore those risks and make sure you have the plan for it. And then what we always tell clients is that it's a long journey. Okay, these things don't happen overnight. You certainly seek assistance if you don't have the internal groups or the internal people to do that, because there's a lot of moving parts here, and there's experts out there that can certainly help you along this journey. So that's what I have. Here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me, with any questions. Be happy to have a chat about anything specific that you may have, on anything I may have covered today. So with that, Mary Beth, we can open it for questions.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Rob. So at this time, we're going to move into our audience question and answer session. So again, for those of you who may have joined us late in the webinar, you can send in your questions by typing them into the question box, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. So our first question is, how long does it take to develop an informatics roadmap?
Obviously, depending on the organization, for mid-sized type laboratory, single facility, you can get it done pretty quickly. In a couple of month time frame, depending on the number of groups you have. We've done these with international type clients, multiple facilities on different continents. That takes longer. I mean, it could certainly go 6+ months, but that really comes down to the objectives. Even with bigger organizations, when our clients have said, kind of here's what we're trying to accomplish, it doesn't necessarily have to get too involved. We can do it a lot faster. But I guess, Mary Beth, this is one of these depends on the organization type answers.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. We have another question, kind of segues from that. Is a 3 to 5 year roadmap typical, and can they have longer or shorter time frames?
It's usually the kind of the average of what we see. Certainly shorter time frames, definitely. I wouldn't recommend longer time frames. Even the 5 year. We call it a 3 to 5 year roadmap, but I would say 99% of the time it's more like a 3-year roadmap. It's tough to look out 5 years, in anything, but specifically this, with just a lot of the dynamic nature of the informatics, field right now. So I'd say it's probably closer to 3 than 5.
All right, great, thanks. We have another question that asks, what role does Asterix play in the development of a roadmap?
We play the role really to kind of fill in the gaps that our clients have. Sometimes, we're just advisors only, where, our clients have, folks that can focus on this, or groups that, can focus on this, but maybe have never really done it before or haven't done it in a while. And we just, need some guidance at times. So we'll have a member on the team that, can answer questions, or, point folks in the right directions, or, bounce ideas off of. Other times we do a turnkey, where our clients would not have really the experience nor the staff to do this. So we would really do everything on this. Obviously, the clients would have to have the users available for us to speak with during the business process analysis, et cetera. But Asterix would do a lot of the heavy lifting.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have another question that says, how do you handle a company acquisition where the acquired company uses a system that worked for them, but is not the system that the parent company uses? Is it best to force the integration over time, or to allow the acquired site to continue with their working system?
Yeah, that's a great question, and really applicable, I think, in today's environment, right? I always say you need a scorecard to keep track of who's acquiring who and who's purchased what company. Usually, what we see is, certainly after the acquisition happens, each company maintains its own systems, and runs that for a while. And then, there's always the planning and harmonization phase that goes, with the mergers and acquisitions. A lot of time the acquiring company wins, and whatever systems they are using, the acquired company will then implement, unless it is something that is very, very specific to that company. Maybe they're using a system that is designed for the type of work and workflows that they do. The acquiring company does not do that, hence the need for the acquisition. So they may leave them, they'll leave them alone. But one thing, especially the challenging thing, is if a company acquires another company and they do similar things, because obviously you don't want different facilities now doing different workflows all the time. So you'll have to get into a harmonization process, and that's part of the business process analysis, where you say, okay, we're doing it this way, they're doing it that way. Can we come to one way of doing it that will meet the needs of both organizations? And that's that's a lot more difficult. But in order to reduce the risk, especially all of the moving parts you have in an acquisition, let the systems run as they were when they were individual companies, and then spend the time and come up with a good plan to harmonize or harmonize those if necessary.
All right, great, thank you. We have another question that says, I'm a chemist, not an IT expert. How can I get some help to understand my current infrastructure and what choices might work for us in a way that I can understand?
Yeah, that's a good question. One thing that I like to point out about Asterix specifically is that probably about 90% of our staff has science degrees. So these are the people that would come on site, work with your teams in a roadmap type of a project, or if we're doing requirements analysis. They are science folks first, and learn the technology over time. So I always say, we speak science speak to the scientists, not IT speak. We know IT speak, we'll speak that to the IT folks. So it's not about, we don't sit in front of folks and say, hey, what do you guys need? But, kind of help you along the way. And, I always say, we kind of speak the scientist language. So, we really help kind of non-IT folks understand the IT landscape, but in language, that would be more science rather than IT. We don't talk about, a lot about APIs and multi-tenant cloud deployments and stuff like that, because a lot of folks that are chemists may not understand those terms. So we can explain exactly what that means, if necessary. So that's how we work with our clients on all of the different projects that we do.
Great, thank you. We have time for a couple more questions. What are ways to manage LIMS with short-term projects within ELN maintaining long-term projects? How can I integrate them together?
Can you repeat that?
Sure. And if you go to your Q&A box, Rob, you could also see the question typed out.
Okay.
What are ways to manage LIMS with short-term projects within ELN maintaining long-term projects? How can I integrate them together?
Okay. If I understand this question correctly, and if not, then we could certainly have a discussion on it. It looks like, you having a LIMS system, and an ELN as well, and maybe, one is a little bit longer duration. I think you need to look. This goes back to what I was talking about before, where you look at, the data that's being collected in each one of those areas, right? And then what would be the required handoff between, those two systems. Um, when you talk about integration of systems, the questions we always get asked is, well, what's the best tool to integrate, and, from a technology standpoint. And really, integration, that part of integration is kind of trivial. These days with systems and the tools that they have, and it's very, it's not that difficult to integrate an ELN and a LIMS from a technical perspective. The challenge there is more from the data perspective of, all right, in our organization, what system is going to own what data? And coming up and everybody agreeing on that, because there's a gray area, right? You'll get some, a data set that says, all right, well, this could be in the ELN or it could be in the LIMS. What would be the right system, for that? So, understanding that, kind of that transactional data structure strategy is usually the more difficult part. So again, I hope I answered this question. I sort of interpreted what it was, but if I missed it, then feel free to reach out to me. I'd happy to have a conversation with you.
All right, great. Thank you, Rob. We have time for one more question. Oh, this is a nice one. What software did you use to make that super nice informatics roadmap?
Let's see. I did not. Full disclosure, I did not make that super nice informatics roadmap. I bet you it was probably PowerPoint or something like that. That is my guess. I borrowed that from one of my colleagues, but I can find that out for you.
All right, great. Thanks. And that was a nice compliment to your presentation. So this brings us to the end of today's webinar. And I'd just like to remind all of you that this webinar will be available for free on-demand download shortly following this live presentation. So on behalf of LabManager, I'd like to thank Robert Walla for all of the hard work he put into his presentation. And I'd like to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Once again, I'd like to thank our webinar sponsors whose support allows us to offer these webinars free of charge to our readers. Finally, I'd like to invite all of you to attend the rest of the webinars offered today by the Leadership Digital Summit. Our next presentation, Using Data to Understand and Improve the Productivity of Your Lab Staff, will begin in just a little while at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, and we invite you to please join us. For more information on all of our upcoming or on-demand webinars, or learn more about the latest tools and technologies for the laboratory, please visit our website at labmanager.com. We hope you can join us again. Thank you for being a part of our Leadership Digital Summit, and we hope you have a great day.